Well, I'm back. Here we're doing E. E. Cummings' poem, She Being Brand. He did that poem we looked at in class a few weeks ago, or a couple weeks ago, of the a leaf falls, the column, and you can't really read it. You know, Obviously he likes to play with words, letters, syllables, and he does certainly that here. Let's go ahead and try to figure out what's going on here. Now, if we were in class, instead of doing this on video, I'd ask you, do you know what this poem is about? I suspect most of you would say it's about taking a car out for a test drive or something like that. Well, you might be a little surprised. It's not necessarily about that. And I'm going to start this discussion by reading the poem. See what you think. She being brand new, and consequently a little stiff, I was careful of her. And having thoroughly oiled the universal joint, tested my gas, felt of her radiator, made sure her springs were okay, I went right to it, flooded the carburetor, cranked her up, slipped the clutch, and then somehow got into reverse. She kicked what the hell? Next minute I was back in neutral. Tried, and again, slowly, barely nudging my lever right. Oh, and her gears being in A1 shape. Passed from low to second into high like greased lightning. Just as we turned the corner of Divinity Avenue, I touched the accelerator and give her the juice. Good. It was the first ride, and believe we was happy to see how nice she acted right up to the last minute, coming back down by the public gardens. I slammed on the external expanding and external contracting brakes both at once and brought all of her trembling to a dead stand still. So, you guys still think it's about a car ride? By now, hopefully, you realize it's about sex. And she being brand new, it's most likely sex with a virgin. And the whole poem is a metaphor for that, I suppose. I want to introduce here the concept of a conceit. A conceit is a metaphor, but it's a special kind of metaphor where we're comparing two things, obviously, in a metaphor. But the conceit goes on. It's extended. It just keeps going and going. And here the conceit extends through the whole poem. He's making this comparison for a test drive to having sex with a virgin in it. He doesn't just stop in one stanza or 4 or 5 lines. He goes on the whole poem to try to make that suggestion. So this is a conceit, and this comes into some of the other poetry we're going to be reading. And so I want you to keep that word in mind. It doesn't mean conceited. It just means an extended metaphor. Now, how does E. Cummings get this across? Well, it has to do with the way he breaks up the lines. For example, line, I guess it's 7 and 8, where we have O at the end of one line and K at the beginning of the other, with periods after them, okay. It forces you can't just say her springs were okay. You got to say her springs were okay, right? It causes that pause, which kind of suggests by the tone that something else might be happening here. And then once we get into that kind of thing, everything kind of falls into place. Okay. Now, if you look at for example, line 3, I don't want to get graphic with the sexual elements here, but she being brand new, and consequently, a little stiff I was. Now, you could read the line like that, and of course, not wanting to be graphic, you can figure out what it could mean in that sense. Or you could read it the other way. A little stiff, consequently a little stiff, I was careful of her. You can read it that way. Cummings is having it both ways, I'm sure, because he wants to do that. And, he was a modernist poet from around the early 20th century, 1918 through 35, something like that. And this was when they were experimenting a lot with poetic forms and literature altogether. The modernists were a pretty wild bunch overall. If you take my American Lit class, we go into modernism. But in any case, yeah, he's taking out the language for a test drive actually here. Now, if and so once you realize what's happening here, you can kind of make your own projections all the way through, and that might make an interesting paper to write about all the different things. Just for example, we got into reverse. She kicked what the hell. Next minute, I was back in neutral, tried, and again, this is line what, 12, 13, 14. Again, look how he divides those words slowly, barely, B-A-R-E. What does bare mean? Not having any clothing on, right? Nudging my lever, right? Oh, and okay, I don't need to read it again. You can go through and once you get the joke, by the way, is this poem just a joke? We're supposed to be, joking about the whole thing, and once we get it, it's go, ha ha, we got it. Is there anything serious about this poem? Let's come back to that question in a minute. I want to call out a couple of other things. E. E. Cummings, we're going to see this. We're going to do one more poem of his. Look in line, I guess it's 29 or so. External expanding, external contracting, breaks both at once. We're at, he's pushing these words together. That suggests a lot of things. We know we're reaching the moment of climax here. So we're kind of speeding up the whole situation here. And then the both at once, I'll let you figure that out on your own. Let's go to line 30. Is it 33? I'm trying to see the connection. Yeah. See the capital B at the end of trembling? What do you think critics have said about that capital B? Can your imagination take you there? Should it take you there? Should we go there? Well, notice those curves on that capital B. What would those curves remind you of? You don't have to say, but maybe a couple of different things. So that critics actually go there. All kinds of issues here. They do like that when they examine this poem. And then of course we have you notice how the lines shorten so much down at the end? Brought all of her trembling to a dead standstill. Because it's like that, you got to stop and read. Each line pausing. It's just kind of normal to do that when the lines are written that way. And of course, that suggests that moment afterwards when things do come to a dead standstill. So anyway, a kind of fun poem in that way. But let's talk about the serious nature of this, if there is one. Do we want one? Probably not. Guys have always had a kind of visual appreciation of women in a lot of ways, and they are attracted to that and get ideas from that. We all know that. At least you should. And so a lot of people have complained over the many hundreds, thousands of years of human existence that men look at women as sex objects, as sex machines, so to speak, without considering the full person. And I suppose that stereotype, there's a lot of truth in it in a lot of ways. And here, we also talk about machines in the feminine. Oh, she's a beauty. She's powerful. She can go 100 miles an hour. Even your riding mowers, motorcycles, riding mowers, speedboats. It's just typical. Most of you are aware of that. And so here we're taking that idea and we're applying it to a woman and comparing her, taking out for a test drive. Is it because the speaker, sees her as a sex machine? Basically, all of the other parts of her, personality or her feelings, all those things don't seem to come into play at all. It's just she's like his car. Take her out for a drive, and there you go. So that's where critics go when they try to get serious about a possible theme. That it's in some ways a critique or maybe even a criticism of the male psyche and how they might view women. So I'll leave you with that. I hope you enjoyed this little poem. I'll be back, I'm sure. Let me find out how to turn this thing off again. Got to hit the right icon. Okay, signing off.